Good morning, everybody. It's Dr. Galvin with my post-ER shift update. Worked kind of unexpectedly last night for Dr. Bream, who needed the night off because his wife had their first child a little earlier than expected, and so I covered his shift. So interesting night last night, fairly busy. Saw a lot of COVID last night, more so than usual. Had a couple very sick people, kind of hypoxic and generally older. But we saw one person who was actually 38 years old that had kind of classic bilateral CT findings of infiltrates, hypoxic. Didn't have to intubate anybody. Nobody was that sick, but both of those people came in very hypoxic. Had a third person that I was pretty sure had COVID. Very, very hypoxic, oxygen saturations in the 70% range. And very surprisingly, that person actually had a spontaneous pneumothorax, meaning that one of their lungs collapsed. And I had to put a chest tube in and reinflated their lungs. And once I did that, she got a lot better. So her COVID test was negative. So I thought that person was going to end up being COVID, and they weren't. So, it's one of the things with emergency medicine. You just never really know what you're going to find out. I had some other kind of bizarre things and had some, kind of entertaining drug-related things that happened last night. And sometimes those things can be, somewhat humorous, especially when the person turns out to be all right. And sometimes people come in a little bit confused and acting unusually, and you come to them think it's a stroke or something dangerous, and it turns out to just be drugs. And it sounds weird, just drugs, but if it's better that it turns out to be a substance and it wears off and they're completely normal than being something bad like a stroke. And that's, you got to realize that people that work in the emergency department have a bit of a sick sense of humor, and I think that's what kind of helps us survive doing the job. And so sometimes people take a little bit of offense to that, but realize if we don't have a sense of humor, we can't really do what we do. And we see a lot of bad stuff, and that kind of little bit twisted sense of humor helps us survive. I do want to talk a little bit about a couple of different things this morning. One is numbers. We've kind of crossed 5 million cases worldwide, and in the U.S. over 1.5 million cases. We're approaching nearly 100,000 deaths in the country. I think we're at 95,000 deaths. So we could probably there was a model that showed I think by the first week of June 6th, they predicted we would hit 100,000 deaths, and that model looks like it may well be come true. We're at 95,000 deaths, and we've still got about a week to go in May. So that we may go past that. Interesting study out of Korea where they tracked COVID cases to nightclubs. And we're talking about reopening, and there's been some consternation locally here in North Carolina because Governor Cooper has opened up. We're going to phase 2 today. It's Friday, and we're moving to phase 2, and they're going to go back. They're opening restaurants to 50% capacity, but there's been a bit of frustration because bars are not opening and gyms are not reopening. And I'm a CrossFitter, and a lot of CrossFit boxes are upset because they're not opening. And I have some very good friends that own 2 pretty large gyms locally, and I know they're upset that they're not being able to open. And I feel for them, but I also understand that gyms are particularly dangerous because inside, close proximity, rapid breathing, we know that that's a setup for infection. Now, some places that are bigger, I think, are, if they turn their fans on and they open up the garage doors and they have a lot of airflow, you can probably minimize those risks. And I'm actually going to call one of the owners up because I think they can minimize their risk more so than some places. But places that have, lots of treadmills close together, deep inside a building with not a lot of ventilation, those places it's going to be difficult for them to minimize risk. I think moving classes outside is an opportunity for a lot of these gyms. Small boutique places, group fitness, those places, dance classes, yoga studios, it's going to be difficult, and they're going to have to get creative because those places are going to be setups, and bars are setups. And there's some interesting data out of Korea, and I want to make sure I get the data right, but there was a case where they tracked 215 cases essentially to one person who was infected in a nightclub. And what they did was they used credit card data and cell phone data, and they basically tracked one person who was infected to 95 cases from 5 nightclubs. So one infected person went to 5 nightclubs in the course of, I think, one night, and he subsequently infected 95 people. And then those 95 people went on to infect 120 people more. So 215 confirmed cases from basically one person going to 5 nightclubs. So one night out, one infected person ended up infecting 215 people total. And so that's the kind of spread we can get when we have close proximity in loud places where we're yelling and speaking loudly. That's the danger of bars and in some cases gyms as well. And moderating that risk is a problem. And again, the people that go to these places are at low risk, but the question always is, are the people that go to those places, are they going to be subsequently exposing people who may not be at low risk? Again, I'm recording in my physician lounge, and the morning docs are coming in, so I apologize for the background. Another question is, do lockdowns work? And there's some interesting data out of Germany and France that looked at lockdowns, and they went through, Germany and France did a couple different things. In France, they locked down fairly quickly in France, and what they found was, prior to their locking down, and I think France went from being not locked down at all to locking down quickly, and prior to locking down, their R naught, meaning that their infection rate was around 3. I think it was 2.9. So that means that before they locked down, they're finding that each infected person was infecting about 2.9 other people. And then they locked things down very tightly, and they quickly dropped down by about 2/3, and their R naught went down to 0.67, which is below the level of sustaining the infection. And that was, they showed a consistent decline in cases and sort of stopped the infection in its tracks pretty quickly. Germany did a stepwise thing, and what they did was they initially in early March blocked large gatherings. And then in mid-March, they closed schools. And then at the end of March, they really locked things down tightly and strictly limited interpersonal contact. And what Germany saw was when they locked down large gatherings, they had about a 30% transmission rate. When they locked down schools, it dropped down to 12%. And then when they locked down individual contact, it dropped down to 2%. So that's some lockdown data from other countries. It's hard to really get that data from the US because we've had such a hodgepodge of lockdowns in different states. And there's some interesting data that has not been fully analyzed yet, looking at states that lock down versus states that haven't, that are next door to each other, but it's not been fully analyzed yet. I'm tired. I'm going to stop it there. I'm going to be back tomorrow. Again, I'm working quite a bit over this weekend. I'm going to ask you guys to do something. I'm going to try to break things up. My passion is fitness and wellness and things like that. And the things we focus on my clinic are nutrition, fitness, sleep, stress, and hormones. So I'm going to ask you folks, if you want, I want to start doing some content revolving around those. So if you've got questions about those things, nutrition, fitness, sleep, stress, and hormones, will you put them in the comments? And I'm going to start incorporating answers to questions about those in the coming weeks. So if you could put some questions about that, I'll try to, today's Friday, I won't post, I'll post this today. I'll try to do something tomorrow, and then I'm going to be working Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night, so I'll do post-ER things this week, and then I'll do some more content next week, and then I work again next weekend. So have a great night, or a great, my night, your day, and I'll talk to you tomorrow. See ya.